Once upon a time, three trees stood upon a mountain and dreamed about what they wanted to be when they grew up. The first tree looked up at the stars in the sky, twinkling like diamonds, and said, I want to be a beautiful treasure chest. I want to be covered with gold and filled with precious stones. I will hold the most beautiful treasure in all the world. The second tree looked down at a stream trickling by into the ocean and said, I want to be a strong sailing ship. I will sail mighty waters and I will hold powerful kings. I will be the strongest ship that was ever made. The third tree looked down in the valley and saw busy men and busy women working in a busy town and said, I don't want to leave this mountaintop at all. I want to grow stronger and taller, and when people look at me, they will see me pointing to heaven, and they will think of God. Many years passed, and the trees grew stronger and taller and more beautiful. Then one day, three woodcutters climbed up the mountain. The first woodcutter looked up at the first tree and said, This tree is beautiful. And with a swoop of his axe, the first tree fell down. Now I shall be made into a beautiful treasure chest, the first tree thought. I will hold the most precious treasure in all the world. The second woodcutter looked up at the second tree and said, This tree is strong. And with a swoop of his axe, the second tree fell. Now I shall be made into a mighty sailing ship, the second tree thought. The third tree's heart sank when she saw the third woodcutter approach her, but she stood straight and tall and pointed to heaven. But the third woodcutter didn't even look up at her. He said, Any tree will do for me. And with a swoop of his axe, the third tree fell. The first tree was excited when the woodcutter brought him to a carpenter's shop. But in this old carpenter's shop, no treasure chests were made. Instead, the carpenter carved the first tree into a feed box for animals. The once beautiful tree, who dreamed of being covered in gold and filled with precious stones, was now coated with sawdust and filled with hay for hungry farm animals. The second tree rejoiced when he was taken to a shipyard, but no mighty sailing ships were being made that day. Instead, the second tree was hammered into a simple fishing boat, too small and too weak to sail in the ocean or even a river. The second tree was placed into a lake, and every day men hauled dead, smelly fish in him to the shore. The third tree was confused when the woodcutter brought him to a lumber yard. She was cut into strong beams and left alone. All I ever wanted to do, she thought, was stay up on that mountain top and point to God. Many days and many nights passed, and the three trees nearly forgot their dreams. But one night, starlight shone on the first tree as a new mother placed her baby inside the feed box. Her husband said, I wish I could have made a cradle for him, but she gently squeezed his hand, looked at the starlight shining on the baby in the feed box, and said, This manger is beautiful. And the first tree realized he was holding the greatest treasure in all the world. One day, a tired traveler and his friends got into the old fishing boat and made their way across the lake. The traveler fell asleep, and as they were making their way across, a thundering and thrashing storm arose, and the second tree shuddered because he knew he wasn't strong enough to handle the storm and carry all the passengers safely across. But then the traveler woke up. He stretched out his hand and said, Peace. And just as quickly as the storm arose, it subsided. One Friday, the third tree's beams were yanked from the old forgotten lumber yard and carried through an angry and jeering crowd. Then a man's hands and feet were nailed to her. She felt ugly and harsh and betrayed. But on Sunday morning, as the sun rose and the earth trembled with joy beneath her, the third tree realized that God's love had changed everything. It had made the first tree the first tree beautiful, the second tree strong, and every time people would think of the third tree, they would think of God. And that was better than being the tallest tree in the world.